Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And if you've already done those things for us, thank you so much. It means a huge amount and you're an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. How are you getting on?
Not bad at all. I'm very much ready to talk about some video games, Lewis. I've decompressed. My life has got very slightly easier over the past couple of weeks. So we're doing good, and I'm ready to talk about some video games. Probably worth mentioning to the ladies and gentlemen that we are actually recording a day earlier than usual. We're recording on the Monday of the week and not the Tuesday of the week for reasons that I could not get out of. But apart from that, things have got a lot easier, so, which is good. Anyway, Lewis, what have you been playing this week?
Well, this week, Mark, to be honest, I've kind of deliberately parked my Bloodborne playthrough. I've not touched it since we last spoke. I realised I think I just needed a bit of a psychological break from it. It was the only thing I was playing a lot of the time, and I was, I'm trying to push through it, and I want to keep enjoying it. So it's just been one of those weeks where it's not been the ideal time to play it, and I've kind of told myself, that's okay, you're stepping away from it for a couple of days, and you'll come back to it. And to be honest, part of the reason I was doing that was that I was finding it much simpler and easier to continue my playthrough of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart.
I bet you are, yeah.
Which I've mentioned the last few weeks that I've been playing. Previously, I was kind of playing that on the side of Bloodborne, but I just reached a kind of critical mass with that game where I thought, I can just play through this. It is absolutely mindless fun. I don't really have to put any stress or any tension into my playtime when I'm playing that in quite the same way that I do with Bloodborne. So I've been marching through that. I'm basically on the very final level. I got to that last night and just decided to finish off not super late at night, basically. So I've just got the last wee bit of that to play, so I probably won't mention it again next week. But yeah, I don't have too much to add about that game, to be honest, Mark. It is what it is. It is good fun. It is good, clean fun. It's all about the weapons and the movement. It never varies a great deal from that, but in terms of, it's just got that Insomniac stamp of quality all over it. It's a game that you really like to spend time in. And that's an accolade we maybe don't really put enough credit on a lot of the time, but it is genuinely a game like the Spider-Man games were from Insomniac that is just genuinely pleasurable to spend a good number of hours in, and it never really dips from that. There's very little moments where you're thinking, God, this isn't very good, or this is lagging in a certain sense. So enjoying it. Be glad that when it's done, I'm going to jump back into Bloodborne, and I've got 1 or 2 other wee games on the go as well. Most notably, Mark, I've made a little start on Unpacking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Which is, if people don't know it, it's a really small indie game from a developer called Witchbeam that just came out a week or 2 ago, and it's on Xbox Game Pass, which is kind of why I've been playing it. And kind of more to the point, partly why I was playing it is that I just really wanted something lo-fi and really chill to play in bed, just to kind of help with getting to sleep on a couple of nights. Not been sleeping especially well recently, and I decided to give this a try after we were talking about it a little bit off air last week. And it is available to play over the cloud, and I hooked up my DualSense to my iPhone. Yeah, I did play it a little bit on my laptop as well, which is a completely conventional experience. But
I can't believe your first jump into cloud gaming is for the most basic indie game anyone will ever have seen. Google this game, ladies and gentlemen. It is the most simple thing in the world. Not that detracts from the game in any capacity. In actual fact, it got a good bit of traction when it came out and people were enjoying it. But it's just funny. I can't believe you went to all the bother to hook up your DualSense.
It doesn't require the power of the cloud, I will say that. It's if people don't know it, it's an isometric 8-bit game basically, and literally, as the title is, Unpacking. It is a game where you unpack boxes and decorate a room or multiple rooms. Essentially, you're getting the story of this, I think it's a girl's life from kind of young childhood. It's like her first bedroom when she's like 8 or something like that, and I've played 2 or 3 levels since then, so it's like maybe her first college apartment and then like a house share, and so the rooms that you get to expand into get slightly bigger each time, and the objects that you get track with a person's life moving through the ages. it's good fun. Like, there's not a lot to it. I think it is going to be one of these like slightly touching indie games that you get that will kind of have something to say about the nature of time or how our life changes and all that kind of stuff. But so far, it's just a kind of like fun Tetris light. Essentially, you've got objects to fit into spaces, and you're trying to make sure that you don't put them in completely ludicrous places. That's how you advance. That's it. But in terms of that, I just need a game to turn my brain off at night. It was ticking some boxes, so I'll let you know how I get on if I keep playing it a bit more.
Nice one, man. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I'd far cry from Bloodborne, I will say that much.
Anyway, Mark, what about you? What have you been playing this week?
Well, Lewis, it's still more Near Replicant. I think that we're getting towards the sort of final stretch here, I would say. There's been a time jump, which I believe is about halfway or maybe slightly beyond, actually. I'm still enjoying it. It's still good fun. The story is still a bit of an enigma to me in terms of like the overarching world and what is really going on, because you do get the sense that you're not really being told what is happening here, whereas the sort of micro story, if you like, of you trying to initially cure your sister and then find your sister, I won't go into any spoilers again beyond that, but yeah, very much still enjoying it. It's very much still engaging. The combat is fairly mindless. I did say last week, jokingly, that this game needed a fast travel system because I was doing a lot of running around the same places. And the game does have a fast travel system, Lewis. It just didn't introduce that system until I was 23 hours into the game, which is mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. I could not believe it when it introduced this fast travel system, because around the map there were sort of dots. So it's boats, basically. You get on a boat and it takes you to different places, right? And there were wee docks here and there, and I thought, oh, maybe that was for a fast travel system, but then the fast travel system just never materialised. So I thought, oh well, it can't be for that. It just must be a design choice. I've just decided to put all these wee docks here and there, I guess. But it was for that. It was exactly what I thought it was for. It just never came until 20 fucking hours after I first saw them. Unbelievable. I could not believe it when they introduced that fast travel system. I really, really couldn't. However, it is being used plentifully at the moment. I will say, because in terms of doing like the side missions, so I'm trying to do all the side missions as well as the main campaign. To be honest with you, I could have probably blasted through the main campaign by now, to be honest, but I'm trying to play the game properly, and a lot of them aren't great, if I'm completely honest with you. A lot of them are just go to place, talk to person, and then come back. And when you were running about doing that, it was quite frustrating sometimes, you know. They aren't all like that, and you do get some good ones, but there are too many that are like that, I would say. But now with fast travel, easy peasy, totally straightforward, and now I just get all the gold for it, and it's great.
It does sound a wee bit there like it's showing its age. You know, this is a remake, if people don't realise, so... Yeah,
I have to say that in very many capacities, it sort of does show its age, and I think that is part of it. But in terms of like the combat and stuff like that, like I said, that is what is really drawn me in. I just like it. It's just good fun. It's basically, I mean, you can do complicated things and complicated combos and whatever if you wanted to, but at the end of the day, like, it's quite good to just do some crazy DMC-esque moves and just sort of like batter square and just win, you know? It's like, as you said, like, it doesn't take like a huge amount of effort, and for a lot of the last wee while I have been incredibly busy and gaming time has been limited, and just having that mind numbing but still like good fun, like still engaging, I'm still like enjoying it at the same time, but I don't really have to put a lot of effort into it, and I'm sort of here for it right now, you know?
Totally, yeah. I honestly think it's important sometimes to just give yourself that space, because otherwise this is a hobby that can become a bit of a chore at times. If all of your gaming time is about progress and difficulty and challenge rather than just being like, this is fun. You know, our hobbies are also supposed to be fun as much as they're supposed to be other things. So,
and I mean, if folk are into that and if folk are really into like challenging themselves and whatever, like, you do you, man. But like every now and again, I need to batter square only and be fine with it. Anyway, Lewis, I think it's time for the news. Alright, let's news item number 1. Nintendo have announced that as part of their Q2 financial results, they have shipped 92.87 million Switch units as of September the 30th, meaning that it is now only 9 million units away from becoming Nintendo's best-selling home console of all time and surpassing the Wii. But they have actually cut their shipping forecast from 25.5 million to 24 million due to the semiconductor shortage. So they could actually have sold even more, believe it or not. Nintendo have also promised to continue to expand both Nintendo Switch Online and the expansion pass as well, which is good because I think that Nintendo Switch Online leaves a lot to be desired. And with the rumoured Game Boy additions to the expansion pass, I think that is quite encouraging to hear them say, because I don't think that the launch of the expansion pass went particularly brilliantly, I think it's fair to say. We also discussed that at the time, that we thought that there might be more stuff coming to the expansion pass, and it sounds as though that is the direction that things are heading, which does raise the question, why not just wait until you have all that content ready to go rather than put out this half-arsed thing with a big price tag? But anyway, it has also been announced that due to the unexpected level of success of the Switch, I don't think anyone expected it to be beating the Wii, but that is something that Nintendo now expect to happen by the end of this financial year. So by the end of March next year, they're expecting it to be their best-selling home console ever. They have invested $888 million into a development expansion fund, which is very good to hear. They have invested $44 million in the growth of its non-gaming entertainment, e.g. all those movies. Hopefully far fewer of them going forward will feature Chris Pratt. They have also invested $2.6 billion in, quotes, building a foundation for maintaining and expanding relationships with consumers. I do not know what that means, but I'm glad that they are investing their money back into their development, back into things that help the consumer rather than just lining their shareholders' pockets. You know, it's just nice to hear that at least some of it's going back into the business, you know. And, Lewis, they have also said that they are still internally discussing the concept and launch time for their next gaming system. Now, it would obviously be daft if Nintendo weren't thinking about when their next console was going to come out. But at the same time, I believe that this is the first time we have heard them outright say, we are actively looking into our next-gen console, you know, which is pretty exciting. Although maybe we shouldn't be surprised about that, because the Switch came out in early 2017, and console generations last about 6 years-ish, would you say, give or take? I know that the previous generation lasted a wee bit longer than that, and I know that the Wii U, for example, lasted a wee bit less than that. So maybe it's not that crazy that Nintendo are thinking about their next console. But yeah, it's just good to hear them say that. You know, I wonder now if, in actual fact, they're just going to sort of forgo the Switch Pro that we were all sort of looking for and just leave us with the OLED Switch and just actually focus on getting their next machine out, whatever that turns out to be, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some ways that final point is the $1 million question for the future of Nintendo, really. Will there be a Switch 2? Will they do what they often do and fundamentally rethink what their console is before the next generation, which they do tend to do. You know, they tend to redevelop everything, kind of change what the form factor is, change what it can do, what its USPs are. I would hope that they are looking at the incredible success of the Switch, and congratulations to them, really, for what is...
Oh, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's
to be on the verge of surpassing the Wii, which was a cultural phenomenon when it released. That's really incredible, and, you know, hats off to them for doing that. It remains to be seen whether they will look at that and think we should just put out a Switch 2 or a Switch Pro or whatever that's going to be, or whether they'll go back to having a home console and a portable console. You can just never tell with Nintendo whether they'll make what would appear to us to be the smart decision of just essentially making the Switch be the future of Nintendo, right? Whatever next iteration of that there is. And I think there's two basic versions of that next console from them. As you say, either it means that there is no Switch Pro, and what we've always been talking about as being a Switch Pro will kind of be the basis for the next generation Switch. Or if that console is still maybe 3 years out from now, I could still see them doing a Switch Pro in the meantime if they can create a new piece of hardware that's significantly different enough from that. They might feel like if they could put a Switch Pro next year, they could still launch a Switch 2 2 years after that, you know? And I think the key to all of this is you want to leave people wanting more, you know what I mean? You want to strike while the iron's hot, which is to say that you can't let the Switch stagnate for 3 years before you announce, oh, we've got this new one, promise you'll want that, because the mood will have changed a bit. While this is still selling like crazy and while people still want it and while they're talking about enhancements to it, that's when you want to be announcing your new console, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you in terms of historically what was acceptable. Like, if they announced a Switch Pro next year and launched a Switch Pro next year, I don't necessarily think that that would be a problem for then saying 2023 sounds about right, they are getting their new shiny console out, a Switch 2 or whatever. I just don't know if they're going to be hampered by combination of COVID and semiconductor shortage to be able to actually physically do that. Therefore, if they go, well, we can't get the components right now to do this, let's stockpile components to do this other thing that might be bigger and better. And as you said, maybe they've got the concept for the Switch Pro and have actually said, well, do you know what, this is actually closer to a new console than it is to a Pro model for a Switch. It's closer to a Switch 2 than it is to a Pro model of the baseline Switch. I wonder if they've got to that stage, do you know what I mean? And I wonder if someone's just made a decision to say, the public have got the OLED Switch, let's just focus on getting them the 4K one that I suppose would at this point have to be at least semi-competing with the Steam Deck, you know?
Yeah, well, exactly that. For the same reason, they're going to want to make sure that their software lineup is ready for that as well, because more maybe than any of the other consoles and platforms, Nintendo need to launch a Switch 2 or a Switch Pro or whatever with games, with the right games, because other than that you are up against the Steam Deck, which is really powerful anyway and has an enormous a library that dwarfs what the Switch will have essentially.
Yeah, but it's all about those first party games, man.
It's all about
that Mario and those Zeldas. Alright, Lewis, news item number 2. EA have said in an earnings call that they think NFTs are going to be the future of the industry. Oh dear. It started, Lewis. It's really started. This obviously comes hot off the heels of Ubisoft announcing that they were looking to employ a quote-unquote play-to-earn model, which would involve selling NFTs to the gamer or making them earn them in some capacity. EA's CEO, Andrew Wilson, specifically said this on the earnings call.
I think the play-to-earn or the NFT conversation is still really, really early. I do think it will be an important part of the future of our industry. As a company, we've been leaders in the creation of digital content that has real collectible value in the embedding of that content as part of live services. What we know about collection over time is the collectability is far more valuable to the collector, where the collected item has utility. And I think that in the context of the games that we create and the live services that we offer, collectible digital content is going to play a meaningful part in our future.
He also ended that conversation by telling people on the call that they should expect us to kind of think more innovatively and creatively about that, referring to the NFTs, on a go-forward basis, which is horrendously CEO talk, but you get the picture. They're really looking into this going forwards. Well, Lewis, the race to the bottom really truly is on between EA, Ubisoft and Activision, I have to say, and continues very strongly this week. Just to touch on the other two briefly, Ubisoft employees under the banner A Better Ubisoft have again launched a petition to change the toxic work culture at Ubisoft. This because the first petition that they signed by over 1,000 employees that should be added, Ubisoft themselves have enacted 0 changes from that petition. 0. None. They have made no changes whatsoever, which is frankly disgraceful. And the co-leader quotes of Blizzard, this on the Activision side of course, Jen O'Neill has stepped down after only 3 months in the position, as she was appointed co-leader quotes after President J. Allen Brack stepped down in August following the initial sexual discrimination lawsuits. And Lewis, just hours before we started recording, Square Enix have also announced their intentions to use NFTs and blockchain in their games as well. So the future of AAA games is looking real fucking bright. Real bright.
Yep, not an especially great collection of bits of news, all of that, to be honest.
No, certainly not. Certainly not, Lewis. In fact, it really, really goddamn depressing, I'll be totally honest with you.
Yeah. As I said last week, this NFT invasion of the gaming space feels very, very much underway and now upon us, really. Most of the major publishers have said something about it in the last few days. I do think it's important to mention that a lot of this news about NFTs and blockchain and gaming has come out of these Q2 financial reports. just in case people aren't aware, so that's essentially the company talking to its investors. There's a tiny bit of hope for me that this is just them essentially saying to the people who put all the money in, we are looking at all of these new potential ways of making even more money, and that maybe it won't come to pass. But in the case of Square Enix, for example, they've already done a trial run of some kind of daft graphic that people have paid stupid amounts of money for, and EA, I think we can all see quite clearly where NFT tech, if that's what we were calling it, would come into play, how they could make that work within the context of FIFA Ultimate Team. So I think we're on the precipice here, and this is, as we said at length last week, Mark, this is not good stuff. This is environmentally damaging stuff. It is financially kind of dumb stuff for the average person.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you simply cannot own a piece of code any more than I can own a piece of code whilst I can copy that code freely. Like, for example, those images from Square Enix, like, I can right-click and copy that and paste it wherever the hell I goddamn please. Very easily. And it makes no difference whether or not I own the NFT for that. Like, just because you have some perceived ownership over it, is because someone has told you now own that because you've given them some money in the blockchain or however the fuck it works. Again, this is half the problem, is that, and I very much include myself in this, like, we need to better educate ourselves on this so that we can talk about it intelligently and know precisely why this is a bad idea. But basically, I heard NFTs described as assigning value, basically, like giving a value to things, getting people to pay for things that are effectively valueless or free. You know what I mean? Like, so those images that Square Enix put out, like, just because you have the NFT for that doesn't mean you own it any more than me, not in any real way. Like, there's no real world scenario where you have more command over that image than I do. Like, there's nothing you can do with it that I can't do with it just because you paid for an NFT. It's ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I saw a really good thread comparing the whole, not just the gaming side of it, but the whole NFT kind of bubble at the moment to that thing that happened a decade or two ago where people started buying stars. You know, you would buy a star for someone and you would get a piece of paper that says, my mum owns this star out there in the galaxy, and of course you don't own anything, you own a bit of paper that says you own something, and that's all this is buying an entry on a database that has no other kind of real world value. But you know, it does have this colossal environmental impact, and it will create false scarcity and therefore increase pricing. If we just look at the gaming space, you know, this is likely to mean, for example, or could mean ultimately, that FIFA Ultimate Team cards, instead of trading for whatever they trade for in game, and the small amounts, although they can obviously mount up, but the small amounts of money that you pay to access that could just utterly explode on essentially a private market that is dominated by this tech knowledge and these people with seemingly limitless funds to plough into a fantasy. It's dangerous stuff. I think you're totally right to say that, Mark. I think a lot of people need to educate themselves about this quite quickly, and not be sucked in, because what you're going to start seeing is just adverts for this from all sorts of companies, not just gaming companies, but loads of companies that you follow and that you trust are going to start advertising you NFTs soon. And if you're not aware of what that kind of means or what your place in that ecosystem is, then you're potentially going to lose out.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, like, legitimately, I think that this is quite scary stuff. I do not like this direction at all, and for, well, at the time anyway, like, third-party AAA gaming outside of the platform holders, who I haven't said anything about this yet. Yeah, it's scary stuff. It really is. I'm very much not into it, I have to say. I mean, if you thought microtransactions were bad, this is going to be way, way, way worse.
Totally.
Way worse. All right, let's news item number 3. Speaking of Square Enix, they have admitted in a shareholders meeting that Marvel's Avengers performance was, quote-unquote, disappointing. The phrase "no shit" jumps to mind there. Square Enix's president Yusuke Matsuda has said this during the company's annual report.
Marvel's Avengers was an ambitious title for us in that we took on the games as a service model. We overcame a variety of unexpected difficulties in the final phase of the game's development, including needing to transition to work from home due to the pandemic. We were able to surmount these challenges and release the game, but it has unfortunately not proven as successful as we would have liked. Nonetheless, taking on the games as a service model highlighted issues that we are likely to face in future game development efforts, such as the need to select game designs that mesh with the unique attributes and tastes of our studios and development teams. While the new challenge that we tackled with this title produced a disappointing outcome, we are certain that the games as a service approach will grow in importance as gaming becomes more service oriented. How we go about creating new experiences by incorporating this trend into our game design is a key question that we will need to answer going forward.
So all the headlines around this basically are that he is essentially admitting that Crystal Dynamics were not a good fit for this game, which is particularly interesting because he said in 2019 in an interview with VentureBeat that they were a good fit for this game. This also comes as well as Crystal Dynamics are currently in the midst of a huge fan backlash for introducing a paid XP booster into Marvel's Avengers, like Assassin's Creed style, which is something that they specifically said they wouldn't do, and have now been forced to remove the paid XP booster only a month after it was introduced. Basically, the Avengers started out bad. Like, the launch was bad, it had server issues, had technical problems, it had bugs, it had a lack of in-game content, which I actually think was the real killer. But even since then, they have struggled to release timely content in any capacity. There have been multiple delays facing all its DLC. I know that the pandemic has definitely played into that in some capacity, and it is unfortunate for the Avengers that they maybe have had to delay things more than they otherwise would have done. Apparently this PlayStation exclusive Spider-Man DLC content is coming this year at some point, but I mean, really, at this point, who cares? Like, who is still playing this game? And Lewis, actually, it's funny, I should say that because I checked on SteamDB just before we were recording here. Do you have any inclination of how many people on Steam, and granted this is not necessarily indicative across the consoles, but I think it gives a good idea of the picture, how many people were playing Marvel's Avengers on Steam just before we started recording?
I'm going to guess from the framing of the question, only a couple of thousand, probably.
470.
Oh.
I mean, that is real bad. It's Marvel's Avengers list. You could not have had a bigger property dropped in your lap that was screaming success, and they've just fucking fumbled it so hard. They really have.
I think all those thousands that I was expecting there are probably off playing Guardians of the Galaxy at the moment, really, aren't they?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, like, across all the consoles, maybe it is a couple of thousand, you know what I mean? But on Steam, 470 as of this recording.
I mean, I think you're right when you say that, Mark. Like, at this point, who cares enough about this game? Like, adding Spider-Man to it, and even that is still platform exclusive.
Exactly. You might get some PlayStation fans back on board for a little while, but wide range, like, is it even worth it? Like, I know you've committed in your roadmap for the game and whatever to provide certain content for the people who have bought the game, but I mean, would anyone be really that bothered if they cut their losses at this point, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure there would be some fans that would be upset about that.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think that there would be a general backlash because...
But would anyone notice?
Because you promised these things and now you're not going to deliver these things because the game hasn't went well, but... Oh, man, I just think in reality this is going to affect so few people at this point. It really is.
I think that's totally right. Yeah, I think going back to this original statement, this is all a lesson to be learned, or a series of lessons to be learned for Square Enix, and to a certain extent for Crystal Dynamics perhaps as well, about what type of games they want to make and how good they are at making different types of games, and sort of what your content roadmap has to be if you're a publisher like Square Enix. As you say, like, these have been really spread out. It is quite some time since the game came out, and we're only now getting to the Spider-Man drop coming, which was kind of one of the pre-order bonuses, it felt like. Not saying that officially that it was, but one of the things that before the game came out, it was like, if you buy it on PlayStation, you'll get Spider-Man. And it's like a year or more later, you know, and it's just...
It probably is about a year now, actually, isn't it? Because it came out just at the console launches, and which was about a year ago now, wasn't it?
Yeah, it hasn't gone well, and there's a lot to be taken away from that. I'm concerned a little bit from the statement that has been made here. They're basically saying games of service aren't the problem, the players are the problem, you know, the teams that we put together are the problem, rather than going, maybe actually this isn't always what people want, or this exact version of games as a service isn't really what players want and expect from IP like this. It feels like they've just gone to the simplest thing, which is just to say, like, oh, the staff wasn't right for this. And Crystal Dynamics make good games, so it's not, you know, it's not quite as simple as that. They make good games for the types of games that they tend to make. They've just been brought in to work on the Perfect Dark. You know, other teams see their viability, see some talent there. Not that I play a lot of their games particularly, but I'm uncomfortable with the idea of studio head saying, we made the right decision. Games as a service is the right decision, but the decision that we got wrong was to employ these people to do it, instead of saying, like, maybe we should have thought about that at that point and not made that decision wrongly, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I'm sure Crystal Dynamics have done the best that they could, right? But let's face it, this has not went well for them either. But
no.
I mean, definitely a large portion of the blame does lie with Square Enix for deciding that this is the game that they wanted to make. I mean, ultimately that is probably the pitch that they gave to Disney to get the IP in the first place.
Yeah.
But I think that maybe people at Disney need to recognise that pitches like that don't necessarily work. Do you know what I mean? Just because you hand someone what seems like a totally foolproof IP doesn't necessarily mean in the game as a service model that it's going to go well, which is increasingly becoming something that is very, very difficult to get right. And I think due to the saturation of games that just demand a lot of time from people, trying to break into that, you have to be doing something pretty special and unique and interesting, I think. And just having Marvel characters isn't really good enough, you know?
No, nowhere near good enough, no.
All right, let's news item number 4. PlayStation have made a 5% investment in Devolver Digital. This comes after Devolver Digital was floated on the London Stock Exchange at a value of around $1 billion, which for a company that almost exclusively publishes small indie games, I think is pretty bloody impressive, to be honest. Apparently, that also makes it the largest US company by market capitalization to be admitted to the London Stock Exchange, and is the second largest to be admitted to AIM, which is a sub-market of the London Stock Exchange. Money things, Lewis. Who knows what it all means? Anyway, the PlayStation investment is pretty cool. Like, I think that is like genuinely quite a good thing. I wouldn't necessarily think that this would be materializing as, oh well, we're on the horizon of getting a bunch of Devolver Digital exclusives on the PlayStation. I really wouldn't be expecting anything like that at all. Hopefully it just means that these two have a good relationship, and that maybe you will see some Devolver Digital games like advertised on like PlayStation showcases and stuff like that. Maybe we get them a bit sooner through PlayStation Plus and things like that. Do you know what I mean? Maybe the next time a Death's Door rolls round, it comes to PlayStation as a timed exclusive rather than comes to Xbox as a timed exclusive. Stuff like that, rather than getting like big exclusives locked down for PlayStation. Like, I wouldn't be expecting anything like that really at all. I really just think that the big story here is that hopefully with this additional investment, Devolver, who I think we both like quite a lot as a publisher, can be slightly more ambitious with their titles, can maybe do slightly bigger things. More importantly, maybe they can just take bigger risks and give more people in the indie space a platform to show off their games and get their games published, you know?
Yeah, I think this is great news all round without knowing the ins and outs of the money stuff, and maybe someone would be able to point out why that's
it's on the stock exchange. They got money. Yeah. It's like $1 billion. It's cool. It's all fine.
Yeah, that kind of valuation for Devolver is incredible, considering, you know, essentially what they are. They are an indie game publisher. I would never have imagined that they could command that kind of valuation. So shows you how successful they've been in recent years, and massive congratulations to them for that. And yeah, this investment from PlayStation, I think you're totally spot on. Don't see this as tying up some exclusivity. Don't see this as, you know, shutting Xbox in particular out of the market at all. It's not going to be like that at all.
No, because we were just discussing off air as well that Devolver actually have a very good relationship with Xbox as well. I wouldn't be expecting Xbox to be shut out in any capacity at
Absolutely.
all.
I mean, we had those stats before about how well indie games sell across the 3 different platform holders, and Sony were doing
very much
badly.
At the bottom. Very much at the bottom, yes.
And, you know, Devolver are certainly not going to want to stop selling their games on Switch, and they're definitely going to want those on Steam and on the Steam Deck going forward. So none of that stuff is going to happen. This is all about, well, hopefully this is all about creating a bit more of a connection between the two. I really like your suggestion there, Mark, of more Devolver games coming to PS Plus, maybe even access to like the Devolver library through something like PlayStation Now or the PS Plus collection that we have on PS5. But ultimately, I think this is just PlayStation. This is what we've seen them do quite a lot recently, of just spreading their money around different teams, smaller teams. I think when we spoke about this at length in one of our topics of the week a month or two ago, we were saying this idea of it's PlayStation nurturing the future of the industry in a lot of different ways. They're backing small teams, they're backing really talented creative directors, and here we see them basically saying to, you know, a successful company, like, we see the value in you, we want to support that and have a connection to that and have a say on how things go with you moving forward. I think that is really good, and I hope that we do see some good stuff from it, even if it literally is just appearing in showcases.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think PlayStation are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. I think
No,
they're
of course.
putting that investment in because they expect to get more back out at some point.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
nonetheless, in the short term, I think that is helpful for Devolver, and it's good to see PlayStation at least invest in the industry at large. You know what I mean? It was like what we were talking about earlier with Nintendo. They're putting money back into their development teams.
Totally.
You know what I mean? It's not just going to line shareholders' pockets, it's also an investment in the industry that has made you the money that you've got as well, which is just good to see. Just good to see. Anyway, let's finish off as we always do with a couple of shout-outs. Shout-out number 1. Forza Horizon 5 comes out this week, and in fact comes out tomorrow as we are recording this. It's currently sitting with a 91 on Series X and PC, and I don't know that there is much to say beyond the fact that they have absolutely smashed it. The game apparently plays absolutely great. The gameplay elements are absolutely great. Online works from the small sample size of people that are being able to play it, I suppose. The graphics look absolutely ridiculous. In fact, I would go so far as to say that it is the best looking visually next-gen game that we've had so far. It very much seems like it is so good, and the fact that it's on Games Pass as well obviously helps this, but it seems as though the game is so good that even if you're not into cars or you're not into racing games, this might actually be worth checking out. Similarly to like Microsoft Flight Simulator, like nobody was into Flight Simulator games, but the game was that good, people were like, no, you've got to check this out, this is really cool, you know? I was looking down the Metacritic reviews. I think 2/3 of them were like 90 plus, which is just ridiculous, and nothing was less than an 8. Very, very impressive scores. Very well done, Playground Games. I mean, what do you say? They've absolutely killed it.
Yeah, they have absolutely killed it. It's been really impressive to see these scores come out and see just some of the critical reactions to it. We were talking about this very briefly off air, that Forza has always had pretty good scores, but it's not easy to achieve good scores necessarily with racing games, you know?
No. I don't think it's without merit either. Like, I mean, these games are top of the field right now, you know? They
totally,
just are.
exactly that, you know, but it's that thing of if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't look quite right, if it isn't deep enough as a gameplay experience, you won't get those kind of scores. So I think it would be easy for people to look at Forza and just think, well, it's scoring so well and people are talking about it so much because it looks so beautiful, but there is actually a solid game underneath all of that as well. And yeah, like you say, hats off to the developers for achieving that. And I think it's the highest rated new game of 2021 at the moment, which is some achievement.
There you go. I have to say, I mean, the game does look absolutely stunning. I think that's basically undeniable, to be honest with you. But as you said, unless you've got substance underneath that, you're not getting scores like that. Very, very impressive. All right, let's shout out number 2. Shin Megami Tensei 5 has come out this week as well. I know basically no one cares about this, but I do, so please just indulge me. I have to say that the game has pretty good reviews in and of itself. It's currently sitting with an 87 on Metacritic. Shin Megami Tensei is the series that the Persona series spun off from. Persona 5 was very much one of my favourite games that I played last year, all 125 hours of it. Shin Megami Tensei is sort of Persona's darker, older, angsty brother, as the Persona series has sort of become its own thing entirely, basically. The series is something that I've been looking forward to getting into for a while. I still want to go back and play the Shin Megami Tensei 3 remaster, which I believe came out earlier this year. And it's good to see that the series is still going strong, you know what I mean? That after that I can play the next couple and still enjoy it, you know? Presumably you have no interest in this whatsoever, Lewis.
No, not especially, to be honest. But, you know, it is great to see that it's getting the kind of reaction that it has got. Do you think that you will be playing this then?
I hope so. I mean, it's one of those things like Persona where it came out and I was like, I really want to play that. I have no time whatsoever to dedicate to that sort of experience right now, so it will have to wait. But yes, I do hope to eventually get around to playing it. I will say that. Alright, let's shout out number 3. Call of Duty Vanguard has also come out this week, and unfortunately, this one has fairly middling reviews, I have to say. It's currently sitting with a 76 on PS5 and an 80 on PC. That 80 is only based on 6 reviews, though, so take that with a pinch of salt. And currently only has 3 reviews on Series X, but very much trending in the same direction, I would say. Basically, the overarching vibe seems to be that it's not as good as the Modern Warfare reboot. The story itself seems to be getting mixed reviews. Some people seem to like it, some people don't. But the prevailing note seems to be that it is pretty short. The multiplayer and the zombies seem to be very much what they are, what they have been in the past. Overall, If you're a COD fan, I'm sure you will like this game, particularly if you're into the more historical ones, the more World War II focused ones. But even then, I wouldn't be expecting anything drastically new. I wouldn't even be expecting anything particularly interesting, to be completely honest with you. It very much feels like the same old Call of Duty, if I'm honest. And final shout out number 4, we got a good 18-ish minutes of Elden Ring gameplay loose, and goodness me, it looked absolutely fantastic. I have to say, I had slight concerns about how the Soulsborne formula would be translating to an open world, and I sort of do a little bit as well, but after that gameplay trailer, I am very excited. I feel much better about that. I loved the Breath of the Wild style map, where it was basically empty, and you had to like populate it with your own pins and stuff like that. Loved that very much. They also showed off dungeons, and it more seems to be that these dungeons will be connected by a sort of wider open world, but when you are in those dungeons, it felt much more like a traditional Soulsborne experience, you know. I must admit, man, I was very, very excited after that trailer. I thought it looked fucking great.
Yeah, I figured you would be when I was watching it. Yeah, I do agree. Like, I thought it was pretty impressive stuff, and particularly that finding a balance between open world gameplay and what Soulsborne fans are going to expect from it. I mean, my experience obviously of Souls games is largely from Bloodborne at this point, and I thought some of the combat looked quite different to what I would expect from their kind of game, particularly sort of what looked to me like quite low impact magic and stuff like that. Like,
yeah, that was cool. Yeah, they were sort of leaning into that more, because magic's been in a lot of them, obviously. I mean, it's in Bloodborne as well, but it's a sort of like ancillary build. It's not the primary way to play the game, you wouldn't have thought, you know what I mean? Whereas it seems to be very dominant, at least in the trailer, you know?
Yeah, and a lot of the combat seemed to have a lot of variety in it, so rather than just getting sword slashes, you were getting kind of like semi-magic things where like a sword slash would create a gust of wind, and then you'd get stuff that was more like a wand that was pinging off projectiles, and then you're getting kind of like magic blue bows that are firing 3 arrows, and then you're getting arms that transform into dragon heads. So there's quite a lot going on.
Standard stuff, I think.
Yeah. But no, I was really impressed. Anyone who's interested in Souls games should go and check out that gameplay trailer for sure. Yeah,
really cool. Links as ever over on the show notes at PlayersToo.com. And just a couple of lightning shout outs, just because there's a lot of sort of wee things that happened this week that maybe didn't fit into proper shout outs. But basically, Konami have delayed the eFootball update until 2022 and have refunded the DLC, so that game is continuing to be the car crasher that it looked like. 2K look like they are interested in potentially taking the FIFA name away from EA if they are not going to renew their deal, which is something that we'd speculated on when we first talked about it. 2K being weirdly coy about the whole situation. And Marvel's Midnight Suns has been delayed until the second half of 2022 from the early part of 2022, I believe February, which is turning into a nightmare month for games. So I think for Marvel's Midnight Suns, that's probably a good move for them, wouldn't you agree?
Yep, absolutely. Get out of the hot kitchen.
All right, Lewis. With that, I think it is time for a beer, and then we'll be back for Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is the Xbox Series X and S Year 1 list. We did mention briefly earlier in the podcast that we are coming up to the 1 year anniversary of the next generation of consoles, and in actual fact, this week will be the 1 year anniversary of the Series X and S, so we just thought that we would do a little look back on its first year, basically. Don't worry, PlayStation will be getting its episode next week.
Yeah, we're going to do a bit of a series on this. I can't believe that we are at the 1 year anniversary of these consoles already.
I know, it's wild to think about. It's absolutely wild to think about.
So yeah, we're at the point now where the Xbox has been out for basically a year. By the time that you guys hear this, it'll have been out for a year and a day, I think. To give a kind of broad picture of where we're at with the Xbox at the moment, there was some analysis done after an investors call at the end of October by Daniel Ahmad, summarised in a series of tweets, and we'll obviously put them in the show notes over at PlayersToo.com. But basically, the Xbox Series X and S have sold over 8 million consoles at the moment. That's an estimate. All these numbers are estimates because Microsoft doesn't publish the exact figures publicly, but has sold over 8 million units now. That means 8 million have gone to shops, but we all know that it's near impossible to buy any consoles right now, so that 8 million is almost certainly landed in homes. Perhaps the more interesting metric really is that Game Pass subscriptions are now over 20 million. Again, another estimate, but I remember at the time when this was being reported that it had fallen slightly short of where Xbox wanted it to be, but it is still an absolutely incredible adoption rate for Xbox owners and people playing on PC as well. Obviously, as I just mentioned, hardware is still massively constrained, and Phil Spencer did say at the end of October as well that shortages were likely to continue well into 2022, not just because of the chip shortage, but I think all of the knock-on effect of COVID and the supply chain crisis that we're all seeing as well. So don't expect to be picking up any consoles anytime soon without a fair bit of effort. And just to cap that tweet from Daniel Ahmad, he said that content and services are the long-term driver of growth, and that will continue this holiday thanks to Halo Infinite, which we will definitely come on to in the course of this conversation. So that's the picture where we are, Mark. Xbox has sold a good few million consoles less than the PlayStation 5. We know that for certain. Back in August, I think there was a gap of about 4 million units, so assuming it's still the same, PlayStation is on about 12 or 13 million. What we also knew at that point, though, was that the Xbox Series X was almost 1.7 million units ahead of the Xbox One at the same point in its cycle. So it is selling way better than its predecessor, and it was, Microsoft said very quickly after the launch last year, that it was the biggest launch that they'd had for a gaming hardware product. So pretty impressive on all of those ways. But what is your thoughts overall, your headline thoughts on year one of the Xbox Series X and S?
How should I say this?
Uh-oh.
I'm not saying that it has been about a launch. In actual fact, I think that those numbers prove that it's actually been an incredibly successful launch. Just because it is not quite as good as the PlayStation 5s does not mean that this isn't probably one of the most successful console launches in history. However, I feel that there is a lacking on the games front to really draw me to buy a Series X, and probably is the reason why I still don't have a Series X, because as of right now, there is nothing on those consoles, on the next gen consoles, that I can't play on my old Xbox One X or on my PlayStation 5. And I think that that is sort of where the Series X has fallen down a little bit. I think that the future for Xbox is very bright indeed with a lot of these studios that they've purchased, not least of which Bethesda, obviously. However, as we stand right now, year one, there's nothing drawing me to buying an Xbox, and I think that that is sort of where I'm standing right now. Do you know? I'm not saying that there won't be in the future. In fact, there almost certainly will be in the future. But right now, not so much. Well, I hope that that's fair. I'm not just trying to like dunk on them or anything, you know. But that is my genuine feeling towards the Series X right now.
I think that's a fair takeaway, to be honest. I don't imagine that too many people, other than, you know, the fanboys, could disagree too heartily with that. Ultimately, we buy these consoles for their games, and as you say, there hasn't been much in the way of exclusive titles for the Xbox Series at the moment. Just to rattle through it really quickly, I mean, I think we've basically had The Medium, The Ascent, 12 Minutes, Forza Horizon. I might be missing one or two others. I mean, there's games like Sable that are only on the Xbox at the moment but aren't necessarily exclusive. Death's Door was a timed exclusive. Yakuza Like a Dragon was a timed exclusive. But in terms of actual Xbox games, there's basically been like 3 or 4. In fact, even The Medium came to PlayStation
even
eventually.
The Medium,
so,
I was just going to say, is on PlayStation now as well, yeah.
So we're really, I mean, basically, in terms of headline games that have, well, hasn't technically released even yet as we speak right now, but in terms of headline big first party games, we're only talking about Forza, right? That's the only game that has come out in the first year of that kind of AAA top level caliber. And when you compare that to the PlayStation slate for year one, there isn't really much of a comparison, I don't think.
Well, yeah, I think that is the problem, really, because you say Forza Horizon 5, which again is due to come out, what, tomorrow as we're recording this? Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
It's also available on the Xbox One.
Yeah.
Like, I can still play that on the Xbox One. When Halo comes out in December, I can still play that on the Xbox One. I'm not saying that these are necessarily the best ways to play these games. In fact, they're almost definitely not, let's be honest, but there's still nothing that I'm like, oh, that's the one, that's the killer app, that's the reason why I have to buy a Series X. And I'm not even saying, to be honest with you, that PlayStation have like a huge amount of them either, really. Like, I think a lot of people, for some of the like the PS5 only games, a lot of people are sort of like, well, like, we'll get around to them when we get around to them.
Yeah.
Whenever I get a PS5, it's good to know a game like that's there. But I feel that at least PlayStation have some games like that, some games that will be unmissable to certain people, whereas right now there is nothing that is missable on the Series X because it's available in so many other places. All other games are, you know what I mean? They're available on the last generation of consoles. They're all available on PC by and large as well. I know that that's a sort of different thing altogether, and PlayStation are desperately trying to get more of their games on PC right now, so we should hardly knock Xbox for that, you know? But in terms of the console space, in terms of like for the need to get a Series X, like, and again, I know that this will come in time, and I would definitely will end up having a Series X in time, but right now, year one, I think that they really should have frankly had a better slate of games than they have turned out to have, you know?
Yeah, I think that's, again, a fair assessment, because even when you look at that, a game in particular like 12 minutes that we all sort of expected would be... I don't even want to say that it's on a similar level to Returnal or Deathloop, because obviously they're made by bigger studios even, but looked like the game that was going to stand out from Xbox's kind of year one slate, that wasn't one of the big hitters, but that would capture a lot of attention, and it kind of trundled over the line, and this feeds into Game Pass a little bit, I think, is that there isn't as much need to get absolutely killer games. If what your ambition is to sell Game Pass subscriptions, you need quantity almost more than you need quality, and a lot of people will pick up a 7 or an 8 out of 10 game on Game Pass and try it, even if it's not an absolute world beater. And so, you know, we've talked about this plenty of times, and when we did talk about these consoles 6 months down the line as well, and what we kind of said at that point was the conversation that we would be having about the Xbox Series X and S would be completely different if you removed Game Pass from it. And I think you have got to say that Game Pass has continued to go from strength to strength this year. They've added some fantastic games. They've obviously still got their first party lineup, but when you look at things like Outriders and Back 4 Blood coming day one to the service, you've got Hades, which was kind of a lot of people's game of the year last year, coming to the service. Psychonauts 2 I think is an interesting one, because it's a sort of an Xbox game that is actually available in lots of other places, but coming to Game Pass on day one makes it a particularly attractive thing. And also, just to shout out, back in the day when MLB The Show 21 came to Xbox Game Pass, which was a massive coup.
Oh yeah, that was a big deal, because
that game, if you don't know, is developed by Sony. So
Sony San Diego.
Yeah, so a really kind of odd situation there. But I think what you see there is that the power of Game Pass for the player, but also for the developer and the publishers who want to get their games on there, like, that is pretty confirmed now, I think. I mean, you can debate till the cows come home about is it value for money, blah 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 blah, but ultimately that service is offering so many games, and with the addition of xCloud, I mean, we're getting away from the console here, but that is really what Xbox have been focused on, maybe to the console's detriment.
I mean, I don't think that you're wrong there. I mean, I think that Phil Spencer's goal, first and foremost, was to get as many people signed up to Games Pass as physically possible. And to be fair, he done that in a very good way, e.g. he made the best deal in video games and went, you should sign up to this to everyone. And we all went, yeah, we probably should, Phil, yeah. And we all did that, you know. I mean, it's a fantastic service. I'm really not taking anything away from Games Pass. It is fairly revolutionary in video games. In fact, definitely is revolutionary in video games. I still don't really think it has any real competition at all across gaming in the slightest, which has sort of surprised me, to be honest. I thought that, well, PlayStation specifically would have had some sort of response to that by now, but just have nothing at all, really. I mean, PlayStation Now, we can debate about that if you want, but it's really not even in the same ballpark as Games Pass, let's be honest. Yeah, but I mean, in terms of the console itself, like, I just do feel as though, I mean, as you said, the reason why we buy these consoles is to play their games. You know, that's ultimately the thing. We want to play games, and the reason why we tend to choose consoles, rightly or wrongly, is so that we can play the best games. And I just think that the standard of, and I don't want to get into a whole discussion about PlayStation right now, because they definitely have their foibles as well in year one, which we will definitely come on to next week. But I just think that the quality of the game that you can only get on PlayStation is just unmatched right now, really, as well. Like, in the sense that Xbox have Games Pass, which again is completely unmatched. Like, I still really think that the PlayStation exclusive games that are being made by and large, and I mean, I know that we're sort of hit a little bit of a drought here, and that is unfortunate, and because Horizon was supposed to be coming out now, and it feels like a long time since we've had one, sort of thing. But that again was pushed because of the pandemic. But I just feel as though the standard of game that PlayStation provide is really just next level compared to nearly everyone, but certainly right now at this moment, at the end of year one, ahead of Xbox. I'm not saying that in the future Xbox won't get there or won't even get beyond that, because again, the quality of studios that they now have under their belt is ridiculous, and they could easily rival Sony in terms of quality of game. But right now, I just feel as though, like, literally some of the best games ever made are only available on PlayStation. I felt that going into this generation, and we're here a year later, and I still basically don't feel any different, you know?
Yeah. I think that is almost the most kind of pertinent observation on this first year, really, is that I don't think the conversation has changed at all, really. And it's interesting that, focusing just on the console very briefly again, the things that the Xbox Series X is doing really well, things like smart delivery and, well, particularly smart delivery and the FPS boost that kind of...
Oh, the FPS boost was fantastic. That's a great point, actually. The FPS boost was amazing. That was a great thing.
That kind of brought new life to a lot of older games and just kind of touched them up and made them super high quality again. And so things like that, and I think particularly smart delivery when compared to PlayStation's upgrade systems, which are a total mess and a joke, and I'm sure we'll talk about that more next week. But
yes, we will.
And in a lot of ways, what Xbox has done is just kind of slowly and steadily crept forward, but without the games to make anyone really excited about it. What you've got is a really solid box, but nothing particularly exciting to play on it. And I think, you touched on there, well, we both touched on Halo, and I think in a lot of ways Halo is almost like the relaunch of this console. Like, it's the start of year 2, but it's almost like the kind of 1.0 patch for the Xbox. It's sort of starting it all off again. And I guess just to finish up the conversation the next couple of minutes, where do you see Xbox going in the next year? I mean, let's talk about Halo first, I suppose. Is it going to be the game changer? Is it going to sell these units? And what comes next that you're excited about?
I think that you will see a significant boost in unit sales when Halo comes out, yes. By all accounts, the tech previews and all that they've been doing have been very, very good. People seem to be enjoying the game. The year-long delay, which I really think is played badly in this conversation that we've had, because if we had already had that Halo game come out, do you know what I mean? We're probably having a very different discussion about Xbox off the back of that one game, but it's just such a big property. It would undeniably change the conversation, you know what I mean? And it will undeniably change the conversation come December. I mean, even if it's an absolute disaster, which I really don't think there will be. But I mean, even that will change the conversation, Yeah. Yes, I do think that Halo will change the conversation. Yes, I do think that Halo will sell a huge amount of units. I don't think that Halo will sell a unit to either of us.
No.
But yes, it will sell many units to many people. But at the same time, I don't think it will sell as many units as it could have done, because it's not exclusive. Like, I can still play Halo. Like, if I wanted to go and check out Halo Infinite, I can still do that on my old Xbox One X, you know what I mean? I can do that, no problem at all. It's things like that. Like, you'd really have thought that an IP like Halo, you would have wanted to use that as like leverage, basically. Like, right, we want to show off our new console, we want our biggest IP to do that. Come and get a Series X, come and play Halo, come and see what we can do with this new console, And that's not like to say that PlayStation have, because I mean, the next God of War and Horizon are going to be in similar boats, you know what I mean? But at least they had like other things. They had Returnal, which was really well received. They had Demon Souls, Ratchet and Clank, do you know what I mean? There were things out there that were just like, no, this is only on PlayStation 5, Going forward, I think that Xbox is going to be very strong. Like I do. Like, I want everyone to understand that everything that I'm saying right now is coming from only year one. If we're looking to the future of Xbox, like, I think that what they've done accruing really, really good studios, and obviously the Bethesda acquisition is just next level as well. There will almost certainly be something for everyone there at some point that will basically be an unmissable game nearly for them, you know what I mean, across all those studios and all those games that they're going to be bringing out. And I think that the future is incredibly bright for Xbox. It's just that this year one was fine, but it wasn't great,
Yep, I totally agree with that. That is more or less my assessment, essentially. I think if there hadn't been a pandemic that had affected development and availability, I think you'd be seeing more of these consoles in people's homes, and I think you'd be seeing more of the games that people are excited to get playing on Xbox down the line arriving by now. But in reality, what we've seen is that even the flagship game that all the marketing of the console was tied to was delayed by a full year in order to be ready to be played. And even then, like that, Halo Infinite is still coming without ray tracing out of the box and stuff like that. So even the kinds of improvements that you would expect to see on a next-gen console aren't quite pinned down, which is a little bit disappointing. Yeah. But ultimately, I think you're right that in the coming years, whether it's 2022, whether it's actually even 2023 before we start to see some of the major Bethesda games hit. I mean, we will see Deathloop come to Xbox, this time next year, which is, another exciting thing for Xbox to have up their sleeve, is that they've got all these studios, again, like Double Fine with Psychonauts, that will suddenly only be producing for their own system, which is going to strengthen things. But when we start to see Ninja Theory's games arriving and we see Rare's games arriving, that is when this explosion for Xbox can happen, I think. But it's been like a really long transition year, it feels like, and it just needs...
Yeah.
I really hope for them and for Xbox fans that Halo is the kind of spark of the next stage of the Series X,
Yeah, absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Pyre by Supergiant Games. This the same development studio that made Bastion and Transistor, 2 of the play-along games that we've already done, and Hades, which, as we already mentioned in the podcast, was one of the top games from last year and what we will be playing next month, and I think is something that we've been looking forward to for a while. But Pyre completes the quadrilogy, Lewis, as I keep saying. But nonetheless, I'm excited for this. This is a totally different thing for them completely, and I'm genuinely excited to play it, so really looking forward to it. Downloaded, Lewis, ready to go.
Here we go. It's on. Nice.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.